You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious.
I never have any stress in my life other than when I come here and try and work this machine. I started to record then and I was speaking and it wasn't recording. So I'm sure it's recording now, Phoebe. So
Sam, I've never seen anyone swear at a box the way you swear at that
swear at a box
machine.
I won't go on with that. Now, Phoebe.
Yes, Sam.
No one would know that you were late, and
except for the fact that you told them 3 times.
No, it doesn't matter that you're late. You're not required to be here at any time. We just appreciate you coming in and filling from the not erstwhile means you're dead, doesn't it? Erstwhile? No, Don. Anyhow, he's away.
The absent Don.
So I want to know what held you up.
Yes,
please.
okay. So apologies. I am sitting in for Don just for a couple of weeks while, as we all know, he's on his horse holiday in far north Queensland. So I was late today because I got stuck in traffic. There is a number of trucks heading into the city of Melbourne for a protest. It's Wednesday. It's Wednesday morning when we're speaking. I think it's related to diesel prices actually, but anyway, that doesn't matter. There's a whole lot of trucks heading into the city, and it just created somewhat of a gridlock on the Westgate Bridge and on the Westgate Freeway. So what should have taken me 12 minutes to get here took me an hour and 5, so apologies, Sam.
Okay, so now, so we have, this is our interview segment. We do an interview every week, and we have an eclectic array of people we've interviewed over the journey, and many of them are suggested by the former Lord Mayor of Brighton, Johnny Locko, who is
the man with twinkly eyes over there.
A mentor to stars around the world. He got us Anne Sydney. He oversees John Van Wisser. Do you want me to go on with this, Johnny, or not?
Please, the self.
Rex said he had a fist fight with someone last week, didn't he? He's had a fist fight with someone else. Did you remember? Was any of that true? Doesn't matter. Marginally. You wouldn't have had a fist fight. So we have with us now a gentleman who I've never met, but I'm looking at his bio, and he seems to be an extraordinarily interesting person. It said on the bio that he was a professor, but he has said that he's not sure if he's still a professor. I'm going to ask him about that, but I'm introducing him as a professor. He is Professor Paul Taylor, and he is a former British Royal Navy aircrew officer. He is an exercise, I was going to say psychologist, physiologist, a nutritionist, and a neuroscientist. All of those 3 things I've completely lost about mentioning any of those. I have no idea what any of that means. And he is a fitness guru, I've got a feeling. He has a podcast himself, and he has a new book out called Death by Comfort. He is about nutrition and exercise and well-being. I've got a feeling. Professor, are you a professor? And welcome to You Cannot Be Serious.
Thank you for that introduction. I am no longer a professor, but I'll always be a professor in Johnny Locko's eyes, so I think that kind of makes it true.
How do you become a professor and then get cancelled?
Yeah, well, I was an adjunct professor at the University of San Francisco, which is like a visiting professor.
And don't call me too sharp, but I can tell that you're probably from Ireland or Scotland?
Well done, you picked that up.
Ireland?
Northern Ireland.
Northern Ireland.
So it's a mix of Ireland and Scotland if you know the history with the Scottish
all I
planters.
know is that there was orange and green at one stage,
that's right.
and I have no idea which was which.
Yes.
Protos and the Catholics.
That's it, exactly.
So I'm calling you professor. I don't give a stuff what anyone says because I like that. So what do you do, and why are you an interesting person that Locko says you must speak to this man? Because we're delighted to speak to you, incidentally.
Thank you. Well, what I do, I'm pretty much a pracademic, which is why I think Johnny Locko likes me, is that I like to take all the academic research in those areas, nutrition, exercise, and movement. I'm also doing a PhD in psychology, and I like to take all of that stuff and turn it into programs and tools that people can use. So I do a lot of consulting with corporations around peak performance and
So
resilience.
they commission you, they
do.
contact you, and they say, will you come and speak to our staff and see if you can get them into shape physically, because if you get them into shape physically, mentally, that will be the knock-on effect.
Well, no, it's both, actually. I don't think you can do the physical without the mental. So I go in, I talk about exercise, nutrition, sleep, mindset, those things that are really important for being a peak performer, whether that is being a peak performer in your own personal life or in the workplace. And the last couple of years, I've done a lot of stuff around resilience. It's obviously been a big thing in the last couple of years. Everybody's a bloody resilience expert now, by the way. But I think that's an area that a lot of people are really quite interested in right now.
Can I go
sorry,
ahead?
jump ahead. No, jump in, Sam.
No, can I ask you that this is about as basic and as simplistic as you can get, Prof.
Yep.
Is there any other way to lose weight than by simply pushing the groceries back from you at the dinner table?
It is the most effective way to lose weight is around nutrition, is what goes
Not
in.
overeating.
What goes
Not
in
eating
is
crap.
the most important thing. And actually, it's what you eat, not just how much you eat. I think there's more and more evidence now that it's about these ultra-processed foods, that now over half of all calories consumed in this country are ultra-processed foods, which I call shit foods. They're foods that look like foods, but they're not real foods. So breakfast cereals, cookies, all the obvious things like baked goods, cookies, biscuits, sausage rolls, sweets. So the things that people think, yeah, that's obviously an ultra-processed food, but it's all the sauces and condiments. But breakfast cereals, supermarket breads, all of these things have got nasty additives in them that destroy our ecosystem.
So I don't want you to talk down any particular product, but when you see advertisements for Ironman breakfast
that makes my blood boil.
Wow, gee, I've got to have this because I've seen someone running an ultra marathon and he's advertising Ironman breakfast cereals, whatever they are. This is just bullshit, is it?
Yeah, it's the work of the devil. It really is the work of the devil, and we are eating, as I said, more than 50% of all calories. In the United States, teenagers eat 67% of all calories are ultra-processed foods and drinks. This is what's driving diabetes, obesity, contributing to mental health, to metabolic syndrome. It's the fact that we're eating stuff that actually isn't natural foods. And the best thing that I've ever heard is actually another one of Johnny Lockle's mates, Dr. John Tickell.
Yes,
and I've stolen his thing, but I actually refer to him.
We've had him in twice.
The low HI diet, where it's human interference. Basically, look at a piece of food. If you can recognize it's been alive recently, it's either grown out of the ground, off a bush, out of a tree, run around on four legs, or swam, eat it. It's fine. But if you're looking at a piece of food and you're going, Mr. Krispy Kreme donut, I don't remember seeing you running around on four legs, then it's in your treat food. So I'm not saying don't eat any of this stuff. I go for the 80-20 rule. So roughly 80% of stuff that goes in your gob should have been alive recently, minimally interfered with by humans, and the other 20% is your treat.
Everything in moderation.
Everything in moderation, including a bit of moderation.
Fair enough.
So we... quite ironically, we were just talking about an activist who is doing the rounds here, a vegan activist who's pinpointing people who sell meat. Is it surely eating meat, whatever that is, whatever brand of meat or whatever, meat is not deleterious.
This is the way I look at it, Sam. If we didn't consume animal foods, historically, we would not exist as a species. Simple as that. We would not exist as a species if we had not have a long history of consuming animal foods and fish, because they are very, very nutrient dense. There's lots of really critical nutrients in them that are important, particularly for brain function. And so if you are on a purely vegan diet without supplementation, you will have massive nutrient deficiencies.
So vegan activists are being mischievous, and they're being untrustworthy.
So look, I look at it from a lot of them are well intentioned. So when I have a conversation with a vegan,
to stop people eating meat?
No, that's different. So the way I look at nutrition, Sam, it's like religion. There's lots of different religions out there, right? Just like there's lots of different ways of eating. Now, with any religion, you have people who loosely follow a religion, and then there's people who are very strict around it. And then with every religion, whether it's Christianity, Islam, Judaism, there are fundamentalist extremists who attack other people who do not follow their practices. This is the same in nutrition. You're talking about the fundamentalist extremist vegans, the vegan activists who are saying nobody should be eating meat and it's evil and stuff like that.
Why do they say that?
Well, because a lot of
them
them
like
are
slaughtering animals.
Some of them are driven by the ethics and saying, well, I don't like death. And here's the thing: there is no food without death, right? What we now know is that large scale industrial farming to create soybeans and a lot of vegetables actually wipes out much more ecosystems and creates more damage to the environment than regenerative farming. So I'm not talking about the type of farming they do in the United States. I'm talking about regenerative farming is the way ahead, and it has to be part of what we do, because regenerative farming actually restores ecosystems. It uses land that's not usable for any other thing, and if you create meat that way, there are very little issues with it. But just telling everybody that they have to be a vegan. I mean, do you look at it, Impossible Meat, which is one of the biggest companies that are creating false meat? They're just being brought to court because they overemphasized the amount of protein that was in their foods by about 30%, right? And a lot of this Impossible Meat, it's shit foods. It's ultra-processed foods. And here's the other thing that I think is really important, that particularly as we get older, you need more protein, right? It is not unheard of. It's very, very common that by the time that you are 75, you'll have lost half of your muscle mass, right? We lose muscle mass about 3 to 8% per decade. You clearly haven't. You're different. Big John Locko is very different because around that exercise. And as you get older, your ability to assimilate amino acids to create muscle and preserve your muscle and bone drops off. And the research is now saying you need more protein as you get older, right? Because if you lose muscle, what we now understand is that muscle is medicine. There's a recent research paper showing that exercise prevents or treats 26 of the most common chronic diseases. And this is part of my book, Death by Comfort. We don't move anywhere near as much as our ancestors did. We lose muscle, we lose bone. And what we have now understood from a physiology perspective, every time your muscles are contracting, they're releasing these magical molecules called myokines that actually get out of your muscle and get into the heart, the liver, the spleen, your gut, your brain, and make them function better.
How do you know all this, Doc? Where have you...
Because I'm a geek.
Pardon?
I'm a geek. So
it's fantastic. I mean, people listening to this would be enlightened like I am, because where do you learn all this?
So I read research papers for fun, right? So and I've done 2 master's degrees, another postgrad, doing a PhD. So I know how to do proper research, and this is my ikigai, as the Japanese call it. That's the reason for me to get up in the morning is to talk about this stuff.
That's incredibly fascinating. And I want to ask 2 questions. One, still on the topic of nutrition, considering you're a very good expert in it. A lot of 2 words that are put together recently over the past couple of years: intermittent fasting.
Yes.
What is it? Does it work or does it not work? And should people be doing it?
So intermittent fasting is one of a number of what I call biologically conserved mechanisms. Now, what does that mean? It means that there are
what does that mean?
Processes. There are metabolic processes that have been conserved across evolution in a number of different species, where there are beneficial effects. So I'm going to get a little bit geeky here, but I'll explain it. Hormesis is a branch of science that is basically sublethal exposure to stressors or toxins, which at high levels can kill you, at low to moderate levels induce stress resistance.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yes. Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher, that which does not kill us makes us stronger. the 4 big hormetic stressors that we are not doing in this modern world of comfort and pleasure, we're not doing anywhere near as much, and they're really important for our biology, are exercise, cold stress, heat stress, and nutritional stress, not from an overnutrition as we're doing now, but from intermittent fasting, right? So there are a number of different ways to do intermittent fasting, all of which have different benefits for different people, right? But I'll give you the top key things that people can try. So one is just extending your night fast for up to 12 hours initially, and then going up to 13, 14, 15, maybe 16 hours, right? And compressing your eating window into 8 hours. That actually has a lot of metabolic benefits but you may, Sam, have a little bit of a better response than I might do on that. That's why I say to people to try it, right?
So is it necessary, A, to have 3 meals a day,
No.
B, to have breakfast, and which is the main meal that you should concentrate on?
Right. So, and it's a great question. So the whole thing used to be,
Thank heavens I've asked.
we should eat 3 meals a day. Well, it's not based on any evidence, right? And there's evidence showing that 2 meals a day, you can actually be more metabolically healthy on 2 meals a day, and particularly 3 meals a day plus snacks. This came in when they told us that we should stop eating fat. Right? And then people were hungry because they were eating more carbohydrate, and then your blood sugar goes up and down and up and down, and then dietitians would say, well, have some snacks. Well, we actually know that being in a constant fed state is actually a cancer promoting environment.
Wow.
Right? So I think we should be having 2 to 3 meals without the snacks. If you're going to do that, you need to have more protein and you need to have more fat.
And it's a more protein. Is this meat?
Meat,
No.
yeah, it can be meat, but it can also be eggs, yogurt, cheese, but also peas, beans, lentils, those sorts of things.
And
right?
people say the main meal of the day is breakfast. Is that a myth?
If we put it this way, we should be eating more of our calories earlier in the day. So your breakfast is when you break your fast. That can be lunch for some people, right? Yes. It's just the first meal of the day.
That's me.
And that should actually be your biggest meal of the day when we look at it from a metabolism perspective, because your blood sugar and insulin responses are better then. The worst thing we do is eat lots of calories late at night and then drink alcohol on top of it. That's terrible for your health.
I hesitate to let my son ask another question because at this stage he's showing he's more intelligent than me, which is getting me really
just
pissed
turn him off. Turn him off,
Yeah,
Sam.
I will turn him off. If he sounds he's getting too smart, I'll turn him off. Go ahead, Max.
No, I just wanted to ask, the umbrella terminology I hear with intermittent fasting is usually with dieting and burning more calories or more of your energy at certain times. So when you were talking about 12 or 14 hours at night before you eat, can you explain that in about as simplest as terms as you possibly can? What time should you be eating if you were to eat twice a day? And how much should you be eating? I understand you're saying fats and proteins and all the dairy and everything like that, but what time should you be eating, considering that what my father just said, breakfast is considered quite a myth? Yeah.
So there's no hard and fast rules about this, right? And nutrition science is really, really hard to do, really rigorous science, and we have individual differences in metabolism. So anybody who tells you that there's a one thing that we should all be doing is either bonkers, or they're trying to sell you something, or they're a member of a cult, right? It's one of those three things.
Fair enough.
Very good.
What I would say is to do experiments. Now, the benefits of extending your fast is that we get what's called metabolic flexibility, which is something that we have lost. That's the ability that our whole human species has had, that when we have carbohydrate, we can run off carbohydrate and glucose. When we don't have that, and when we have a lack of food, we can switch to burning fat as a primary fuel source. Most people struggle these days because they do not have metabolic flexibility, because they're in a constantly fed state. So when you extend that fast window, that overnight fast, beyond about 12 hours, your body will switch to burning fat and ketones, And your brain runs really, really well on that. But people have to get used to it. There's an adaptation process.
You need to train your body for it.
You got to train.
Just
You got
like
to train
anything else,
for it, right?
fair enough.
It's like everything else, right? And all of these things that I'm talking about, the exercise, the fasting, the heat, the cold, best summed up by my favorite philosopher, Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher, who said that we must all undergo a hard winter's training and not enter into things for which we have not prepared. He was talking about life when he said that, right? So it's about, basically the Stoic said, life will throw you up a shit sandwich, but you need to be prepared for that. You need to train, you need to endure some hardship so that you're actually training your body and your brain to be able to deal with these hardships. And I think we've lost that in the modern world.
Well, I'd like to elevate you from an adjunct professor to a real professor because this is an extraordinary.
Well, Paul, I was going to ask, in terms of movement, you mentioned that we live in a comfort zone. We don't move enough.
Yes.
For the average person, what would you be recommending in terms of getting out and getting moving each day?
Right. So a lot of people talk about, well, where's the evidence? Blah, blah, blah. For me, the best evidence come from a study done about 5 years ago by Harvard researchers where they studied the Hadza. Who are the last hunter-gatherer tribe on earth, right? So they live in East Africa, the Hadza. Hadza, H-A-D-Z-A, right? The Hadza. So 90% of their food is still from hunting and gathering, right? So they are the best indication of what our genome is wired for. So here's the thing that a lot of people don't understand. The human genome has not changed significantly in over 45,000 years, right? So we have essentially all of us around this table and all the listeners, we have a hunter-gatherer's genome, but we live in this modern world. Now, the Hadza, what they did is they put activity monitors on them and heart rate monitors on them. And they did it for 2 weeks in 4 2-week blocks over the year because they wanted to get a spread in the hot season and in the dry season and the wet season. They did from people from 15 up to the age of 60 and half males, half females, right? And what they found, so anybody who's got a watch, a tracker, the magic number's 10,000 steps. And I had a Fitbit for years and I got an Apple Watch. And then I thought one day, well, where's this research come from? 10,000 steps. And I looked into it. You know where it came from? A marketing campaign for a Japanese pedometer company in 1964. Bugger all science behind it whatsoever. But it's in our psyche, right? So what do the Hadza do? Hadza women do about 14,000 steps a day. Hadza men do about 18,500. But that's not it. And this is why they had the heart rate monitors on. Because now we talk about steps is just, it's not enough. You've got to get out of your comfort zone. You've got to get out of breath. You've got to stress your body to create adaptation, right? That's the whole point of exercise. It's only good for us because it's a friggin' stressor. Right.
So, Professor.
Yes.
You should be wary of campaigns that mislead you deliberately. So every now and again you hear people say, drinking coffee is very good for you, black coffee. And you think, well, probably the coffee industry has started that rumour. Or dark chocolate. Someone said dark chocolate is extremely good for you.
Red wine, that's the other one.
You've got, these are just people, these are organisations who push this onto the market with the view to misleading people to improve their own bottom line.
So there's a number of things that you're right on there. So we know that big food is actually more powerful than big tobacco, right? So there was an investigative journalist.
Wait, sorry, what do you mean by big food?
Well,
big food being these conglomerates of food companies. So they basically They have these bodies that they set up and that they fund that do research in inverted commas and that lobby governments and all sorts of stuff. And there's all sorts of dodgy stuff that has actually gone on over the time. Now, let's address a couple of those things. Coffee. There is good evidence to suggest that a moderate amount of coffee is actually good for you because of some of the polyphenols in the coffee. Same with dark chocolate. But you've got to have really dark chocolate, like 85, 90%, right? And actually, the stuff that I eat, the green and black's 85% vanilla, is probably better for you than that breakfast cereal that you described earlier on, right? It's got less than half the sugar, and it's got lots of flavonoids in them, right? But there is lots of misleading stuff. Like Dietitians Australia, they were outed from taking money from breakfast cereals, and they had to then say that they were no longer going to take the money from them. So a lot of the stuff that we hear is very, very clouded.
So to Phoebe's point, just before she makes another point, someone told me that it is very, very desirous to have your heart reach its maximum capacity twice a day. So if it beats at 140 minutes by doing exercise, you should get it up to that. As long as you overtax it twice a day, that's good for your health.
I would say twice a day is pretty extreme. Twice a week.
Twice a week.
So here's it. Let me finish off the exercise thing in terms of recommendations. Number one, base level of movement. So just walk more, get off your arse more. When we're sitting for about 30 minutes, there's changes in gene expression that affect your metabolism negatively. So one of the biggest things that people can do is get off their arse and do what I call movement snacks. Little 30-second bursts of exercise, get blood flow and oxygen to your brain, get yourself out of breath, right? That'll switch your metabolism on again, right? If you've got a step counter, minimum 10,000 steps is what we're after. But more important than that is, and as you get older, as you get over 40, I think the most important thing you need to do is lift heavy shit, right? Resistance training has been underappreciated, particularly as we get older, because we have to preserve that muscle. Then once a week minimum, you need to do that maximal interval type training. Go hard, back off, go hard, back off. And then if you have more time, 1 or 2 traditional cardio sessions. But I actually combine the lot. I do high intensity resistance training. So I do circuit based weight training. I'm getting my heart up. I'm getting my muscles activated. I'm preserving my muscle and preserving my bone. And then I'll do occasional, I'll take my dog out for a run. And when I'm working at my desk, I've got a kettlebell sitting beside my desk. And every 30 minutes I get up and I do kettlebell swings, right? So you just got to keep your metabolism moving. And I think for me, that's all you need to know, really.
I'll say really quickly, it's very refreshing to hear this coming from someone that's actually quite fit themselves, rather than getting it from, say, a doctor who's 50 kilos overweight telling you the nutrition and everything like that. It's very refreshing. You obviously know what you're talking about because you implement it in your life.
Well, I am a practitioner. Thank you for that. And here's the thing. I look, doctors are great, but you shouldn't get your nutrition off a doctor.
Yeah.
They get 2 weeks nutritional education. 2 weeks. They get bugger all exercise education. You go to an exercise physiologist, they've done a 5-year degree, right? On exercise. That's the key thing, is that people should be going and seeing exercise physiologists because it's so friggin' important for our physical and mental health.
Can I ask for a couple of practical tips for the average person? So you've covered off on exercise, which would be minimum 10,000 steps a day. Your 30
but that shouldn't be your focus. You should be getting out of breath.
Yes.
Right?
Okay. So, and then, of course, when you're working, taking breaks every 30 minutes for a little exercise or movement snack.
Yep.
And incorporating some form of resistance training into your week. That's the movement or exercise part of the equation. Give us some very simple, practical and realistic tips for how to change our diets.
For
the average person.
Yeah. Okay. So the low HI, right? So human interference, just eat real food. How do I know if it's real food? Real food does not have ingredients. Real food is ingredients, right? So the breakfast, eggs, brilliant, or oats, full fat yogurt, nuts, seeds, berries, right? Mm-hmm. There's the 2 breakfasts that happen in our house. Or have last night's dinner, right? It doesn't need to be that. Lunch, looking at salad, fish, meat, and if you're a vegan, peas, beans, lentils, that sort of stuff. And then dinner is similar to lunch, right? And just then 20% of your treat. Now, if you're like me and you like alcohol, that's a big chunk of your 20%, right? That's the key thing. And I say to people, think about what is sacrosanct, right? So I like sausage rolls, pies, all that. I don't eat that stuff because I trade it for dark chocolate, cheesecake maybe once a fortnight, and alcohol a couple of times a week. And then I'm happy, right? So that 80-20 rule would be the way, and lots of water, right? Bucket. I don't think people drink enough water. So this whole 6 to 8 glasses, I find bullshit. How big's the glass? Does somebody your size need? Do you guys need the same amount of water?
Should you drink 2 litres of water a day?
300 mils for every 10 kilos of body weight. Is the one that I like. So I'm 80 kilos, 2.5 litres roughly.
I see.
Right.
So
if you're 100 kilos, 3 litres.
That's a lot of water.
That's a lot of water. But people will find, particularly if you are chronically dehydrated, your brain does not work well. Your decision making. I mean, you know this from sport. You look at sport. When it's dehydration will kill an athlete's performance way before running out of fuel. Right. And lots of people walk around chronically dehydrated. When you're thirsty, your brain often interprets that as I'm hungry, right? So when people drink more water, they will generate your whole body, all your cells. Like every minute, you've got millions of chemical reactions, and lots of them need water, right? So that is pretty key for me. And the other thing is, have your treat foods. Don't go 100-0. These restrictive diets do not work in the long term. But for me, the low HI diet with the 80-20 rule works in the long term. That's all you need to know. Now, a couple of other things around that. Olive oil should be your go-to oil. Extra virgin, don't scrimp on it. It is the best source of cooking oil that you can possibly get. I'm not a fan of seed oils. They are toxic. So things like canola oil, sunflower oil, all of these things are toxic when they're heated. They give off carcinogenic aldehydes. The stuff that should be in your pantry is the stuff that was in your grandmother's pantry. Lard, right? You'll find lard in our house. You'll find tallow. You will also find extra virgin olive oil and coconut oil. You won't find any other stuff in it. And you'll find butter, not margarine, right? Because let's think of the low HI
not
stuff.
margarine.
Butter, not margarine. Anybody tells you margarine's better than butter needs their head looked
What
at.
about if it tastes like real butter?
It's just eat real butter.
That's amazing, Phoebe, isn't it?
It is. Tell us, I'm going to just move you sort of sideways a little bit here. I write a lot about television, and I understand that you've... Yes, I do. Oh. And I understand that you've had... you've actually worked on one of the big reality TV projects here in Australia previously.
Oh, the footy show. No, I'm joking. It wasn't that big.
No, I did 4 seasons, I think, on The Biggest Loser, where I went in and I...
Oh, so you did work with Dad?
I checked the... I checked the biological age. So I had some software that I licensed to the fitness industry, Fitness First and Virgin Active and some of those guys, around getting an age out of a whole series of tests. So I did their biological age at the start and then their biological age at the end, right? And so I did that for 4 seasons, and it was a bit of a sort of drama reveal about how many years they'd lost. And some of those guys lost 20 years off their biological age, right? It was pretty impressive stuff.
What did you think about reality TV being tucked in behind it all?
It's not real. Nothing is real on TV. And I've actually done a TV series myself called Body and Brain Overhaul, which was reality TV, but most of the stuff, the reality, and my kids hate watching any of that with me, and I don't generally watch it, but I'll go, the producers are, and they're like, oh, shut up, Dad, you're ruining it. But you know what it's like.
Yeah, you're ruining
right?
the magic.
Yes.
You've got to look after the magic.
So you said big food are more
powerful than big tobacco.
What did you say?
Big food are more powerful than big tobacco.
Which is amazing you say that, because I saw last night on overseas television they said the use-by dates that are now being put on products on the shelves in supermarkets are now not when you should eat them when their nutrition drops off, it's when they won't make you ill. They're trying to make sure that they last
Extend
longer.
their shelf life, yeah.
Yes, extend their shelf life because they can't produce enough, or there's shortages or supply chain problems or whatever.
Interesting.
And they said, so be very careful of use-by dates, he said, because they're not when it's best for you, that's when it won't kill you.
Yeah, that's it. And look, that brings up the bigger conversation. This is why the ultra-processed foods are really bad for you, right? It's not just the fat, the salt, the sugar, right? That sort of stuff that we've talked about for years. It's the preservatives that are in these. It's the flavors, it's the colors, it's the emulsifiers that make them taste really good in your mouth, that disrupt your metabolism, right? And this stuff, I like to say to people, we are just a big ecosystem of cells, 50 to 70 trillion, and our ecosystem gets destroyed by this sort of stuff, right? It's poisoning, it's nutritional poisoning that's happening slowly, and our kids are eating much more of this stuff than we ever did when we were kids. And you're going to see it with chronic disease rates going up and up.
Can I ask you about cold therapy? A lot of people I know are seriously into cold therapy. Perhaps, on the lower end of the scale, getting into a cold pool once a day, or having a cold shower once a day.
Yes.
It scales up depending on ice baths, etc. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I am a big fan, right?
Why? Tell me why, because quite frankly, it just does not appeal at all. Yeah.
So this is hormesis, right? This is what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? So when you expose yourself to cold, and we can talk about heat as well, those temperature extremes.
Paul, can I just jump in before you go on? I exposed myself to cold this morning getting here, scraping the ice off my windscreen.
Yes.
That was enough for me rather than getting myself into an ice bath, but please go on.
Yeah, so the big study that did it for me was, and it was written about 7 or 8 years ago, showed that, and it was a Dutch study where they asked people, they split them in half, randomized control trial, really well performed study, and half of them they asked to have a 30-second minimum cold shower at the end of the normal shower. So have your normal shower, turn to cold for 30 seconds. They checked their health, their sickness, their absenteeism, and they found out that at the end of the year, the people who had the cold showers had a 29% reduction in sickness and absenteeism. Now that is off the charts success. If it was a workplace wellness program that had that impact, it would be a blockbuster. So what we know, when you expose yourself to cold, what happens is within milliseconds, there are receptors on your skin that become activated. They activate your nervous system, and your brain kicks in a coordinated response to fight that cold. It activates these things called stress response proteins. They are cold shock proteins. They're the cousins of heat shock proteins, which are why we get benefits from exercise and saunas, which we can talk about in a second, right? But there's this coordinated response, there's release of these stress response hormones that actually make a lot of your biological processes function better. And what the emerging research is showing around cold exposure, that chronic, and it doesn't need to be long, right? So there's guys like Johnny Lucko who goes out and swims in the bay in winter for 20 plus minutes. And that's awesome, but you only need about 2 to 3 minutes of cold exposure, or even less, that 30 seconds, but the optimal is probably 1 to 2 minutes of getting into a cold pool or the cold ocean or a cold shower. To get this activation. So this whole stress response system gets upregulated. What we now know, if we were to look at some of the guys, the open water swimmers, we would find that they have more brown fat than we have. Now, babies have got brown fat, and we lose it as humans. Brown fat is brown because there's more mitochondria. They're like the batteries of your cells, right? They're the little batteries of your cells. That's why it turns brown. And that means that fat burns more energy. So you lose weight with that brown fat, right? So you'll find that these guys often are quite lean. But it also protects your gut. It has benefits for your microbiome in your gut. And it also releases noradrenaline in the brain, which is a feel-good chemical. So if you have depression, you go to a doctor or a psychiatrist, they'll either prescribe you an SSRI or an SNRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors are selective norepinephrine. They work on those neurotransmitters. And it's a feel-good hormone, serotonin and noradrenaline, norepinephrine, but we get it naturally from cold. Like if you get into an ice bath for less than a minute, for like 30 seconds, you get a 400% increase in noradrenaline and dopamine. Really important neurotransmitters for your brain.
This is therapy to me, Doc. You've mentioned 500 words I've never heard of. It's fantastic. If that doesn't get your brain going,
that's it.
So you're simply saying it is extremely important, you say, to have a cold shower after your hot shower whenever
Absolutely.
you shower.
Every day. And you know why? Do you know why I say every day? Because I started off doing it, I said 4 days a week. And then I'd be in the shower on a Monday morning and this little voice would come into my head and go, it's Monday. You don't need to have a cold shower today. And it became a willpower fight. So I just went, you know what? Make it a rule. So it's not a rule. So even if I go out and I'm in the bay and I come back and I'm freezing my ass off, right? And I come in and I have a warm shower, I have to turn it to cold for 30 seconds. You just make it a rule.
I must say I do that. Now I'm just going to read this off this is... He has undergone, this is you, Prof.
This is me.
He has undergone rigorous military combat survival and resistance to interrogation training. And in 2012 became a professional boxer. In 2019 he took up karate to create memories with his kids. And in 2021 both Paul and his 10-year-old son Oscar became Australian Kumite. Combat.
Yeah.
Resistance to interrogation training. What is all military? What did I just read then?
Yeah. So this was
Eloquently put.
Back in 1997, and it was 10 days of pretty hardcore stuff that they're not allowed to do anymore from health and safety perspective. But we were basically, you had 10 days, it was 2 5-day blocks. The first 5 days was training, and the second 5 days was escape and evasion. We were hunted by a hunter force. And in those 10 days, it was winter in the UK when it actually does get cold. We had no sleeping bags. So we slept in what's called tactical bashes, which is where you'll sleep if you're being hunted by a hunter force. So you basically kick your way into the biggest, thorniest bush you can, and that's where you sleep. We had Gore-Tex bivy bags to keep us dry, but no heat. The only food they gave us in 10 days was a chicken between 4 people, and it was alive when we got it. Every single day we got thrashed physically. We had to do night navigation exercises, chronically sleep deprived. I reckon we walked somewhere between 300 and 350 kilometres in the 10 days.
Is that show?
Well, there's this SAS one, right? So I'm looking at that show.
The one overseas, is it called Survivor?
Oh, yeah.
Where they send people out into the middle of...
Hunted. I think it's Hunted. Yeah. And I haven't actually seen that.
There's also Alone. You might be talking about Alone as well, where they drop people in the middle
Alone.
of nowhere and leave them there.
That is the only reality TV show that I will watch.
It's
Alone.
Brilliant. It's exactly what I noticed.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like Bear Grylls.
Yes.
Who sleeps in the dugout, sleeps in the carved out carcass of a camel, and while the... Winnebago's over here with all the crew and the hot food there, and when he's finished, I was wondering how real Alone is, because they tend to send people out there, and if you can't survive, you're dead.
Yeah. Look, I think that one is pretty real, right?
Yeah, because they have to film themselves. They're not being followed by a crew.
That's right.
They're filming themselves.
Yeah, and they get a medical check once a week, right? But at the end of so then we got hunted by a hunter force, right? And everybody's just toast. You're at the end of your tether, and then when you think it's all over, you get introduced to what they call the shock of capture, which is getting a bit of a kicking by a bunch of paratroopers, bagged and tagged, Hessian head, sack over your head.
Waterboarding.
No, not waterboarding, but we had stress positions for about 12 hours in the freezing cold, hooded the whole time, and then interrogated.
Can I just clarify? This is British.
This British Armed Forces, And the stress positions are horrible. absolutely horrible. And the interrogations seemed like a bit of a nice break, but then...
And this is to break you mentally.
Yeah, it's to wear you down, mentally, physically, emotionally, that sort of stuff. But what I noticed, actually one thing that came out of that, I remember at the end of it, you go into this room, and I went in, there's a couple of guys that finished before me, and we're just all sitting down. And I started thinking, how other guys would do. And there was a mate of mine, a big rugby player, will remain nameless, tough as nails. And I thought, he'll do really well. And he came into the room just snivelling like a little kid. And he said, I don't know what these guys did to me, but I felt like I was 4 years old again. And then this guy walked into the room, Steve. I'll not tell his second name, but he was a bit goofy, wasn't very sporty. A few people called him the Gimp, right? It was very, it wasn't very PC in those days, right? And he was whinging about his blisters, right? And everyone's going, mate, everybody's got frigging blisters, get on with it. But he kind of hobbled into the room at the end and he went, that wasn't too bad, was it? And everybody's jaw hit the floor. And then I remember he took his boot off and he said, Jesus, my blisters. And he took his boot off and he had a blister on his heel right through to the bone.
Wow.
Right? And I remember looking at that and I said to myself, never, ever judge anybody again until you have been through the ringer with them. Because you don't know what they're like until, you see into their soul, right? But the other thing that I noticed after that was that stuff that used to be stressful was no longer stressful. That's what started my journey into this whole hormesis. That which does not kill us makes us stronger. And this is ultimately why I'm writing the book Death by Comfort, because I think that we have become way too comfortable. I think a lot of our mental health issues are because we've become too comfortable, because we don't exercise, we don't get into the cold, we don't get extremes of heat, and we've just become life of comfort and pleasure, and it's making us weak.
You almost pointed that out by saying this was in Britain that you did this. You're not allowed to do it now because of that's death by comfort. You're not allowed to do it now because of the new world that we've evolved into and the softness of it all.
You will know you're not even allowed to friggin' offend people now, right?
No.
You can't. I can't be offended. Like that's not the real world. This is a construct that we're making where people can't be offended anymore. It's ridiculous.
Just before he asks this boy again, wouldn't the best way of trying to break you down and seeing if you could, do you think you could survive being waterboarded?
Waterboarded,
which is
simulation of drowning.
I think they put a cloth over you and they pour water down your throat until you nearly think you're going to die.
I was waterboarded as a 14-year-old.
Oh, were you?
Deliberately in a youth club by a bunch of kids, and it was pretty friggin' horrible, I can tell you. And I happen to know an interrogator who said that one of the Al-Qaeda suspects that they had broke within 7 seconds from waterboarding, right? Waterboarding is really extreme. There's not many people who could endure repeat. You think you're going to, it feels like you're going to drown. It absolutely feels like you're going to drown, and it sets off panic in the brain. But we know, like the stuff that we've done to us. So in that room that we were in, we had white noise, and I was in that room for 12 hours. You know white noise when the radio's off station? But we had it at the volume you'd hear music in a nightclub, right? And that actually primes the brain for brainwashing, as does playing music at certain frequencies and light at certain frequencies. And that's with the stuff that the Americans were using in Guantanamo Bay. I mean, all this research was done in the 1960s. There's no way you could get this research done now, but it actually primes the brain for brainwashing.
Can you just say that again about the techno music and brainwashing? What was that?
So music, and it's either techno or thrash metal played at certain frequencies actually primes the brain. It activates the fear responses massively and primes the brain for brainwashing.
So that crap in Zoolander was real?
I haven't seen
Never
Zoolander.
seen Zoolander?
Never seen Zoolander.
Relax, don't do it. They brainwash people. They're comedy. I can't believe that. That's probably the shittest comment you can make on such an intellectual conversation. But I thought I'd still mention it.
Well,
sorry, I'm surprised he hasn't said anything.
There would be. This could go on for an hour, couldn't it?
I've got many more questions.
I like calling you Professor. If ever I was going to call you on Professor, it'd be after today's discussion, I'll tell you that. What else could we possibly, for the lay person, not layman, for the general rank and file out there, what else can we ask?
One more thing I would say, heat exposure, right? So if you have access to a sauna is absolutely brilliant for your health. A big study came out of Finland. Finnish men who use a sauna 4 to 7 times a week live 7 years longer.
So say that again.
Finnish men, big massive study. The Finnish men who had a sauna between 4 and 7 times a week, live 7 years longer than Finnish men who don't have a sauna. And they control for exercise, nutrition, all of those things, right? Same mechanisms as exercise and cold exposure is it activates these stress response pathways that make us stronger, basically. And sauna acts like cardiovascular training, right? When you're in the sauna, your heart rate goes up, your heart is pumping quite hard, and all of these things. But
this is a steam.
Just
dry.
A dry sauna. So the Finnish sauna, but anything that is getting you uncomfortably hot, right?
Really?
So people going, oh, I don't have access to sauna. Hot bath at 40 degrees for 20 minutes activates these magical heat shock proteins.
And then have a cold shower.
And then have a cold shower.
You can just watch the rowing, Dad.
And now, infrared.
I actually have an infrared sauna myself. So they don't get as hot as a traditional Finnish sauna, but they have these infrared lights that actually penetrate the skin and heat you up a little bit from the inside. And actually infrared saunas are shown to help get rid of heavy metals and help detoxify and have similar benefits, although we don't know if the longevity benefits are quite the same as the Finnish sauna because of the high heat temperatures. But I guess research will bear that out in the next 5 to 10 years.
Temperature extremes.
From
hot to cold. From hot to cold is beneficial to your overall wellness and well-being.
Absolutely. The only thing you should be aware of, going from hot to cold, just be wary of it if you've got blood pressure, low blood pressure particularly. Just be aware of that. So make sure you have somebody there the first few times.
So let's be kind of clear on that. If you're going to start sort of an extreme makeover of your health, go and get checked out first.
Get checked out, particularly if you're a bit older, and particularly if you're a bloke, because we've all got a bloody shield of steel, and we think we're in. And if you're going into the cold, go with a friend, right? And just get in the cold water. And the first minute is horrible, but after the first minute, you actually start to get used to it. And then people love it, right? This cold water swimming has gone off in the UK over lockdown. Like, it's gone crazy over lockdown. You speak to any of the Brighton Icebergers or those guys, they'll all tell you that they feel fantastic after they've been in the cold because they get those neurotransmitters released. So it's really good for your mental health and it's really good for your physical health.
No offense though, Professor, if I invited one of my mates in to have a cold shower, I don't think they'll be my mates afterwards.
Maybe start with a bay, not the shower.
Yeah, just putting it quietly.
Hot tub first, then a cold shower,
Phoebe, what we should do is we should replay this to ourselves and write down about 20 points that you should follow, simple points that hitherto I've not even thought of. I do most of this stuff. But
I was going to say, I thought you already were a fair way down the track with this.
And
he carries
this is
a heavy
finally
load every day, that big ego.
A suggestion from off mic, from Johnny. Radiation. Why have you written that down, John? The radiation good for you? And
so here's the thing. My father-in-law, Don McComish, is a retired radiologist. I had this conversation with him, and they were taught any exposure to radiation is bad for your health. And actually, the science now shows that's not true. Chernobyl accident workers who went in, do you remember Chernobyl?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the guys who got exposed to the radiation got heaps of cancer. The accident recovery workers who came in, who got exposed to unhealthy levels of radiation, but nowhere near as much as the other guys, when they followed them up, much less cancer. British medical radiologists in the 60s who they thought were going to get cancer because of the radiation exposure, much less cancer than their peers. US Department of Environment workers who are in high background radon states, again, less cancer. This is hormesis. a little bit of something that at high levels can kill you, at low to moderate levels can actually be beneficial. And there was a study that just published with an Alzheimer's patient who had severe dementia and had to have an X-ray, and after the X-ray, their symptoms reduced in terms of that. And they think it was the stress of the X-ray activated these stress response mechanisms in the body. This is just like exercise. Exercise is only good for you because it's a stressor. Now, should you go out and deliberately expose yourself to radiation? Well, no. Well, we do all the time, the sun, right? Here's the thing. This slip, slop, slop
in the sun?
It's brilliant for you, right? If you have, here's the thing, right? We all know in this country that too much exposure to the sun can create skin cancer, and absolutely that is true. However, if you go too far the other way, a lot of us do. Like there are levels of vitamin D deficiency in this country. They're similar to Scotland, where sun doesn't shine. If you have low vitamin D, it significantly increases your risk of almost every other cancer. It dramatically increases your risk of long COVID and a bad outcome from COVID. Vitamin D is responsible for turning on hundreds of protective genes. I think vitamin D is the most important vitamin there is. And that comes from the sun. So I have at least 20 minutes of unbroken sun exposure a day. That's what I aim to get.
And you're not
without any sunscreen.
Are you not getting around to saying slip, slop, slap is not good for you?
No, I'm not getting around to saying that, but I'm saying we can't go too far where we become scared of the sun. So about 20 minutes of unbroken exposure is really what you need. And in winter, you get a little bit more, right?
Okay, one of the most fascinating discussions we've had on this, and I've thanked John Locko, who said, you must speak to this man, and as our research goes, we do no research. I just look at the bio and you do the rest, and that is the questions lead on from what you say. Professor, I'm calling you, Paul Taylor. That is extraordinary, and we thank you so much for coming in to You Cannot Be Serious. And Death by Comfort is the latest
So
book.
The book will be out in November, Death by Comfort, but if anybody's interested in the interim, I got a podcast, the Mind, Body, Brain Project.
What's it called?
The Mind, Body, Brain Project podcast,
right.
And my website, mindbodybrain.com.au.
Find the podcast on all of the usual
Find it on all the usual players.
And you can Google you and see who you are, which is what I did, except I got this bit of paper here. Thank you so much
Pleasure.
for coming in, Professor.
Thank you.
Take care.